My name is Julie Mock. I'm the Conservation Director for the Colorado Mountain Club. I'm based down in Salida. CMC's headquarters is in Golden, but we work statewide on recreation issues. The club was founded in 1912 and at its heart and soul is a recreation organization. So members join to get outside and to learn skills and form partnerships and community around hiking, mountaineering, backcountry skiing, rock climbing, and other human-powered types of recreation. And in our conservation department, we really focus on taking responsibility for the impact that we have as recreationists on public lands. So we understand that no matter how we're getting outside, there is an impact to natural resources, and we want to make sure that we're doing our part to mitigate those impacts to the best of our abilities. So we work a ton with land managers from the federal level, state and local, on stewardship projects. We run a trails crew that does work out in the field. And then we also do a lot of advocacy and planning work. And that's what takes up a fair amount of my time, working on forest planning issues, some policy and legislative work as well. And then we have our RIMS program, our mobile app and database that we'll be talking about in great detail today. And yeah, really excited to share kind of the updates from the last year of kind of our pilot year and talk through some of the opportunities to get other groups and partners like you all involved in the program moving forward. So with that, I'll let Norm introduce himself. Norm is with the CANA Advisors and has been helping us to build out this program. Norm?
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everybody. And I just want to echo Julie's appreciation for an opportunity to present what we're working on here with you today. And it's great to see everybody in the participant screen. And thank you for joining. So my name is Norm Ryder. I'm with CANA Advisors, and our foundation partnered with Colorado Mountain Club a couple years ago as a technology partner and analysis partner to help with the CMC Recreation Impact Monitoring System. So we're really excited about where we are and what we have to show you today with Julie. And CANA Advisors, we're a small business and we're a bunch of analytics professionals. We all love the outdoors like you do, and we love data and we love analyzing it. So it's a really exciting nexus and partnership that we've established with Colorado Mountain Club, and we're really proud to be part of their team. So back to you, Julie.
Great, thanks, Norm. And Norm and I are gonna tag team a little bit, which is always harder in a virtual setting, but we'll do our best here. So I'm going to share a screen with you guys. Hopefully you can all see what I'm seeing. Let me just move this.
We see your presentation.
Okay. Yeah, so we're going to walk through, we've got some PowerPoints for you today. We're also going to do some live demo of some of the dashboards and kind of analytics work that we're doing. So hopefully it'll be interactive. We've got a couple polls for you guys to fill out and that sort of thing. So we will jump right in here. And kind of to get started, we want to get a sense for who is in the room, who's in our virtual room. So Lucy is going to throw up our first poll. And we're just curious to know what your kind of current affiliation is, who you work for or volunteer for, and then where do you like to get outside? So you should see a poll pop up now and you can answer those two questions. We'll give you just a second to do that. And we did our best to capture as many of the kind of major areas in Colorado. If we missed you, I do apologize. Hopefully we've got the big spots covered. We'll give 5 more seconds to fill that out, and then hopefully Lucy can share the results of that with us. Sweet. So it looks like we've got a lot of nonprofit folks, some federal, state, and local land managers, some volunteers, which is great to see. A lot of folks affiliated with outdoor recreation, some academia and technology. This is great. Majority of folks in the Front Range, Denver, Boulder, FOCO area, and Arkansas River Valley. Awesome. Excellent. Thank you guys for filling that out. Hopefully we can see those results. Excellent. So we're going to start kind of big picture and talk about our recreation impact monitoring system and sort of the overarching goals behind the program. We'll talk through the mobile application a little bit, but then really focus on the data that we've collected and the assessment and analytics work we've done so far. A little bit of this, some of this may be a repeat for folks who attended our conference last year, but bear with us. And you know, when CMC started looking at this program, like I mentioned, we run trail crews that go out into the field. And in a lot of the more remote places in Colorado, we were getting feedback from land managers that they didn't even know how to prioritize where to send our crews, how to deploy resources effectively, because they didn't have the staff and personnel to get out on the ground frequently enough to understand where issues were occurring and what was happening. So we started using our crews to collect some data through an app and provide that back to the Forest Service or BLM, whoever we were working with, to again help them understand what work was out there, maybe what information they would need to go after a grant or go after funding to take care of some bigger maintenance issues that we were seeing out in the field. And that's kind of, you know, from there the program has really grown and developed into this idea of collecting comprehensive and consistent data across a really broad scale, and being able to do that not only on a specific Forest Service district or in a wilderness area, but to do it across across the state or even across the country. Really with the goal of having data that land managers can use to do better stewardship and do better land management planning when they're doing that forest planning or dealing with visitor use permitting or those sorts of things. They've got really good data to be able to do that. So we want to get people involved. We want to be able to crowdsource the data collection by utilizing trained volunteers, getting people while they're out there recreating, collecting information and providing that back to land managers. We're in a really, I think, interesting time period to be talking about data collection during this pandemic and trying to understand really how it's impacting recreation, both use, visitor use, where people are going, kind of the density of outdoor recreation in certain hotspots. I think we're seeing that especially on the Front Range, where people are congregating in spots close to home. But then also understanding the impacts from those increases in recreation and trying to maintain social distancing while you're on the trail. Is that causing widening and major erosion issues because people are passing off trail, that sort of thing. So again, we're seeing these kind of unprecedented changes in outdoor recreation during this, this pandemic specifically, but I think we're seeing it, across the board in Colorado, even without COVID. And so we're trying to get a handle on that and figure out how we can use RIMS and the program that we've developed to supplement other data sources and other data collection methods that different land managers are using. So we have a question that we'd love you to answer in the chat box. We're curious about how your organization or agency is doing any current either visitor use monitoring or monitoring of recreation impacts during the pandemic or at any time really. And where are the gaps in your data collection and analysis? If you could, again, as an organization or agency, have all of the information about where people were going and what was happening on public lands, what would that look like? Where are those gaps and what kind of information are you needing more of? So if you want to enter that into the chat box, folks will be able to see it and just kind of, this is sort of a brainstorming session for you all and for us for sure to get feedback on what the priorities are, especially during this global pandemic. And we do have a question about data coming in geographically distributed. And we will touch on that when we get into the details of how we're collecting information and where we've been collecting it. So seeing some things come into the chat about using trail counters. Anecdotal data, reporting use as a guide or outfitter, trail counters. Trail counters are really popular, and I think, you know, they're excellent, and can be, you know, tuned pretty well to obviously be out there with, you know, 24/7 and kind of monitoring constantly. Some of the more technologically advanced ones can, you know, sometimes tell the difference between user types, but I think that's something that we've seen is you can get a raw number of how many people are passing that trail counter, but you don't get the granular details of whether it's a hiker, mountain biker, motorized user, etc. Monitoring in wilderness, specifically on campsites. Great. This is excellent. We'll talk a little bit about how we are able to integrate different types of data collection that you as an agency or as a volunteer group may already be doing, that can, again, both kind of supplement the RIMS data that's coming in, and build out sort of this bigger picture of what's happening on public lands. Okay. So to again sort of touch on this big picture of what the RIMS program is, I've mentioned the app and we'll look at that in a little bit more detail. That's the program that we launched just last year, and it's really the data collection tool, right? So this is what agency staff and volunteers and recreation users are using out in the field on their smartphones or smart devices to collect information. We also have a RIMS viewer that we'll look at, and that's just a way to see all of the information on a map and do some basic filtering and management of that. The really powerful part behind the RIMS program is this data repository, and this lives in the cloud. It's obviously pulling in all of the information from the RIMS mobile app itself. But again, this is where we have the ability to integrate other data sources that, again, where you may already be collecting trail counter data that you want to compare to the visitor use monitoring that's happening through the app. Or you may have some economic or transportation data that you're able to get access to and pull in. There's a lot of social media data that's available to different agencies, and that may be, you know, the number of folks who are geotagging themselves on the top of Mount Elbert every weekend. It's another touch point, right, of information about how many people are summiting that peak. So we've got this, again, powerful database in the cloud. We can pull all of that information together in one spot, crank it through a bunch of algorithms, and then on the back end, we've now developed dashboards, which are kind of the access point to get at this information, to see it in a bunch of different forms, in charts and graphs and maps, and analyze it in a way that's going to be meaningful for decision making, whether that's where to send your stewardship crew out to do work this week, or how you want to manage visitor use over the coming years. So it's overall a pretty powerful program. And again, we're going to spend a lot of time looking at kind of the dashboard and back end piece of it today. We do have our mobile app training online, and we'll touch on that. So if you're interested just in using the mobile app, we've got some other resources for you, but we'll focus on the back end today. We talked a lot about these components already, but we do always get the question of, you know, why another app, or how is this app different than the apps that are out there currently? We've seen a couple of those icons across the bottom. Cotrex, we had a great presentation from those guys a week or two ago through the Partners in the Outdoors conference. Awesome app, really focused on the recreation user, right? And getting that user the information that they need to go out and travel on public land. So their mapping is great and their resources are great for users, but there's not a lot of data collection happening through that application. We're seeing a lot of agencies use Survey 123. Again, this is an Esri base. It's a great tool for collecting information, but it tends to be really geographically focused, right? You set up a survey for one specific wilderness area or just one location, and it's not you can't take it anywhere, right? As a volunteer, when I'm traveling to different parts of the state, I can't use that same survey in different areas. It's not as accessible to volunteer users. And so again, these are some of the gaps that we've noticed and really went into our thinking behind building this application that's optimized for land managers on the back end to get the information that they need to make decisions. Great, so we're gonna chat a little bit just about the data that we've collected so far. We launched the mobile app in July of 2019. So last year when we did this presentation, we're still kind of just in our beta phase. We're getting ready to roll things out. But we did successfully launch last year in July. And over the course of the last, I don't know, 10 months or so, we've trained over 375 users, and we have, I think, over 500 just general users in the app at this point. We did a bunch of in-person trainings, we did a few webinars, and now all of our training resources are online, and we'll have the link to that webpage at the end, but all of it's now online. You watch a 20-minute training video, take a quick quiz, and then you're able to use all the functions within the app. The volunteers and users in the last year, again, have collected over 2,200 assessments. The majority of those were campsite assessments. We kind of piloted a project in Chaffee County with Chaffee and Vision, and those guys have a presentation this afternoon. They'll talk a little bit more about their overall recreation and balance program. But we did a lot of focused work with volunteers in Chaffee County, which is Salida, Buena Vista area, specifically focused on campsite assessments. So those folks collected over 1,000 campsite assessments for us. These are mainly dispersed sites, not developed sites, to get a sense for where they were located, what their impact was, and the next step is then to prioritize different types of work, possibly looking at moving to designated dispersed sites, that sort of thing. We've got a fair number of trail assessments in the app now too, and visitor use assessments are kind of on the uptick. Throughout the process and throughout the kind of pilot year of the app, we're working really closely with agency folks and also with the volunteers, gathering information, getting feedback from them, and making updates as necessary. So we have another quick poll for you guys. I'm just curious as to how many of you have actually used the RIMS mobile app. So if Lucy will throw up that poll, should just take a second for you to click here and submit your answer. Maybe give folks 5 more seconds and then Lucy can throw up the results of that poll for us. All right, not bad. So about a third split evenly. That's great. It's great to know some folks are using it, and it's good to know that we've got some new folks in the room. So again, like I said, we're not going to focus a ton on the app itself during this presentation, but we will have some time to talk through how you get access to the training and so on and so forth. We know it's really easy to get distracted checking your email and stuff on these virtual things. So if you're doing that, hopefully you can also take some time to download the app if you don't have it yet and get your profile set up, that sort of thing. Okay, so just again, for folks who haven't seen the app itself or used it yet, it's really our data collection tool. We're working right now with geolocated point data. We don't have line or polygon data integrated yet, but that is on our list for future development. Basically, the app takes you through a series of drop-down surveys. When you do an assessment, you can add photos and you can do all of this data collection offline. So if you're in the backcountry, the app works great. We have 4 main types of assessments: visitor use, trail assessments, camping assessments, and signs and facilities. And then we just added a new stewardship report about a week ago. So we're just still testing it out. This is a way for folks to report back on basic stewardship efforts that they're doing, if they're picking up trash, dispersing fire rings, some kind of minor types of stewardship work in the field. Anybody can download the app, and then, like I said, we've got our training available online. We did a lot of work to make sure that our assessments were really objective and as close to standardized as possible, using information and monitoring that agencies are doing already. So a lot of our terminology in the trail assessment comes from the Forest Service Tracks program. All of the ratings in the campsite assessment come from the Forest Service rapid campsite assessment that they use in wilderness areas. So again, trying to line up our metrics as closely as possible with what the agencies are already doing. Every assessment's got, it's associated with GPS coordinates, and then, like I said, you can upload pictures as well. Couple of new features that we just rolled out this spring. You can now edit assessments and save them as drafts. So if you misspell something or want to add more detail or information later, you can go back and edit your assessments. We've added some enhanced just viewing and filtering options within the app itself. And also a really cool new sharing feature. So once you've completed an assessment, you can actually share a PDF link directly via text or email. So if you come across a really big issue and you want to notify your local land manager, you can shoot them that link really easily. So it's a pretty neat new feature. We did also add just a public assessment, so anybody who's an untrained user who just maybe downloads the app from the Play Store can do some really, again, just basic assessments before they go through that training. All right, I'm going to throw it over to Norm for a couple of minutes to talk just a little bit more about the information that we've collected so far.
Thanks, Julie. So you have some crazy looking line charts in front of you here. We wanted to show these to you, and these are just snapshots from our latest dashboard updates. Just wanted to highlight the amount of data that's currently being collected through the CMC RIMS app. So all this data is a reflection of individual assessment entry by different volunteers or other groups to enter this data. And so just to highlight, the top chart is showing a cumulative growth of assessments that were collected over time. And on the left-hand side, and one of the reasons why it's so crunched is because we wanted to show the entire lifespan so far since we launched the CMC RIMS app back in July of 2019 last year. And so we're up to 2,286 assessments. Which is pretty cool, very impressive. A lot of volunteer time and other time went into collecting that. The second graph, where we show a weekly trend of new assessments, you can see that there was some spikes in assessments that were collected over the late summer and the fall time frame. And then we kind of petered out as the snow came into Colorado and people stopped going out and doing trail assessments and camping assessments just because there wasn't as much activity and because there was a lot of snow cover. Back in the winter time frame, we added winter activities to our visitor use monitoring, and we started seeing some more increase in visitor use data collection, which is pretty neat. And then we've seen a spike recently as people are now out and about. Also with the Colorado Mountain Clubs really pushed for using CMC RIMS during the Colorado Public Lands Day, which was a pretty neat initiative. And we're seeing trail crews go out and others that are now really focused on different types of assessments. And then the bottom chart that we show here is basically a breakout of the different types of assessments that have been collected. And once again, this is a cumulative chart, so it's just showing the growth of assessments over time. Out of the 2,286 assessments, about half of those are camping assessments, campsites assessments. So there's been a lot of great activity around capturing the conditions of different campsites, both established and dispersed. We also have trail assessments coming in currently at 564 assessments. And we're anticipating to see that there's a little bit of a an uptick there recently as the trail crews are getting out and other volunteers are getting out and can actually get on the trails and notice any kind of damage that happened over the winter. We have an uptick in visitor use assessments, which is really neat to see people collecting data on, where we're seeing activities in certain areas. As Julie mentioned, as kind of the stay-at-home order is now safe at home, and different counties are starting to open up. And then at the bottom, we have our science and facilities. So not as much there, but those get very specific based on different signage needs and facilities as they're being assessed. So just want to give you guys an overview. So once again, we're at 2,286 assessments as of last week. We do update the data daily within the CMC RIMS database, and we show these weekly snapshots. They update every week. So. Great. And here's another example. We just wanted to show you a little bit more detail about the different types of assessments that we've collected. So a little bit different breakout of the types of assessments. You could see percentage-wise, just over 50% of the assessments are camping assessments. We do have a quarter of them as trail, and the rest visitor use and signs and facilities. We wanted to show a little bit of dispersion. So the map on the right-hand side shows you based on counts of where the majority of the data has been collected. And we did have a question earlier about the trails, how the assessments are being distributed geographically. And so this and some of the other charts we can show when we get to the dashboards kind of show you where the assessments are happening. So you can see there's a good number within the Arkansas River Valley, because that's been a big push over the past year, especially over last summer and fall. But we do have some really cool dispersion, out into the southwest part and into the western slope. We'd love to see a lot more data collection out in the Front Range, because we know there's a lot of activity there right now and a lot of users out there. So, but just wanted to give you guys a little bit of sense of dispersion of where the data is being collected. So once again, this is just data from the CMC RIMS app. So it's all crowdsourced. It's all entered by individuals on their mobile device. And it's pretty exciting to see as over time, this picture changes and we have more and more data collected around the different parts of the state.
Yeah, and I'll just add, a couple of those other hotspots down in the southwest corner. We've got a group out of kind of Ridgeway, Uray area that's been doing a ton of work on trail assessments down there, and that's kind of the hot spot. And then our crews were down on the Rio Grande National Forest doing trail assessments there. So that's right now, because we've again been piloting and have kind of a smaller number of users, we can tag those hot spots to specific groups. But I think, over time, it'll be really interesting to see this map change and grow as we build more, or build our user base and have new groups in different areas of the state collecting information. So another quick poll for you guys. We're curious to know, again, just based on, the agency that you're working for or the organization you're associated with, which assessments would be most kind of applicable and useful for you? And you can select more than one. But, again, these are the ones that we've developed based on feedback from land managers and what their priorities are. The other thing I didn't mention is we've got the opportunity to add new assessments or new modules to the app in the future. So we've talked with different groups about, a wildlife observation module, or perhaps an invasive species module, that sort of thing. So yeah, we're just curious to know from you which modules you would use. And if you have an idea for a custom assessment, let us know that in the chat box as well. So give another 5 seconds to complete this one, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the results. Great. So a lot of folks interested in the trail assessment and visitor use assessment. That's great. That's good to know that those are of interest. Again, we just based on the pilot that we did last year, we're really focused on the camping assessment, but we'd love to see more folks using the trail and visitor use assessment. And then that stewardship assessment, stewardship report as well is brand new. So we're excited to see folks using that. We have a question about understanding how many of the assessments are from trained users and how many from the general public. I would say the vast majority of assessments that we have, probably 99% right now are from trained users. When the general public fills out an assessment, it's called a quick report, and we can separate those out. So we have the ability, again, on the back end of the dashboard to separate out kind of the public assessments from the more detailed trail assessments that trained users are completing. Good question. Okay, I'm going to jump over to demo a couple of things here quickly. Let's see if I can do this properly. Hopefully you guys are now seeing our web viewer, and we're just going to take a look at this real quick. This is an online management tool. It's actually very similar to what you see in the app when you one sec, we're having some power issues here. Let's try this again. Okay, are you guys able to see that web viewer now?
Yes, we can see it. Okay,
excellent. Sorry about that. Yeah, so just a management tool to be able to see assessments that are coming in. These are in real time. So as soon as somebody syncs up the data from their mobile device, it shows up here. You can click on any of these assessments and see all of the information that was entered. So this was just a quick visitor use assessment. Some of you may know Brink Messick completed that one. We've got some good trail assessments from down in the southwest part of the state. And the pictures, again, are one of the most important components, right? Because whether or not a volunteer assesses this condition as poor or extremely poor, you've got the context as a land manager to understand how bad it is and how you want to prioritize resources accordingly. There's a little bit of filtering functionality here as well in this web viewer, but then again, we'll look in more detail at the dashboards here in a second. Great, so just to touch on the kind of goals behind the dashboards. Again, this is the back end access that land managers or volunteer groups would utilize to get a bigger picture for what's happening in the RIMS app and the data that's collected. We can do a lot of geographic filtering. So if a Forest Service district is just interested in the information that's coming in on their district, they don't want to see BLM data, they don't want to see data from across the state. We can do some of that geographic filtering in the dashboards, and then build out these custom charts and graphs and maps to again really paint a picture of all of these data points that are coming in, so you're not just looking just at a map or just at a table with the raw data. We can do some automated email reports from the dashboards, which are really cool. So if your trails foreman wants an email every Monday with all of the new reports of downed trees within a certain area, that's something that can be automated through the dashboard on the back end. So again, it makes that the flow of information from volunteers and people collecting the data to the actual agency managers, hopefully really seamless. We can pull user stats in the dashboards as well, and then we can also do data exports. So if at some point an agency or volunteer group is interested in putting this information into ArcGIS or into another format, you have the ability from the dashboards to pull that out and import it accordingly. So Norm is going to talk us through a couple quick examples, and then we'll actually switch over and demo some of the dashboards as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Julie. Yeah, so we wanted to show you a couple examples. The first one is based on visitor use data, and this is for Lake County. And so I live in Leadville, Colorado, so Lake County is where I live, and so this is near and dear to my heart. And what we show here is just like a cumulative number of visitor use assessments that have been collected over time, with really a push starting at the beginning of this year with the winter type visitor use assessments. And the way that we're quantifying visitor use or activity is through number of vehicles that are observed. And so if you're familiar with the app and the visitor use assessment, and if you recently downloaded the app and taken the training, you can click open your visitor use assessment and check it out. But what we do is we look for parked vehicles and different types of vehicles. So vehicles with trailers, without trailers. Typically in the winter, as we know, visitors with vehicles with trailers are typically snowmobilers or doing something where they have to carry some heavy equipment with them. And so we look at that as an indicator of usage. So we're not really capturing going and doing interviews. We're just observing number of vehicles in a certain area and then capturing that. And so we show the cumulative number of vehicles and then the vehicles per week. And so you could see the increase there. We also look at the number of vehicles per week, and you can start seeing spikes in when observations were taken. So once again, the data we're showing here is only the data from the CMC RIMS app. So we're only looking at kind of like the lower end of usage because we're only capturing usage that individuals observe and then they record in the app. Okay, so some of the cyclical nature of the number of data assessments collected per week could be based on someone's schedule or the data collection plan that's been instituted by a volunteer group, or an individual's availability to go out and collect the data. The other way that we track visitor use is through the number of people, and we track not just the number of people, but basically what they're observed doing. And what they're observed doing is based on the activities that they're doing. So they could be things like trail running or hiking, mountain biking. We also have winter activities, and some of these are related to winter activities. Things like cross-country skiing, Nordic skiing, backcountry skiing, snowmobiling. So we have a whole list of activities that as the user goes through and does a quick assessment, and each visitor use assessment takes maybe 30 seconds, but they could just easily select the activities that they're observing and the number of people are doing those. We also look for things like dogs off leash, dog on leash, and there's a bunch of other kind of fields in there that we don't highlight here at this level, but we can dissect the data back down to the individual activities, where they're located. So one example is looking at the Twin Lakes area in the lower right-hand corner of this slide. We can pop up the dashboard later if we want to, but this is looking at, over the past probably 5 weeks, I'd say, number of visitors observed in the Twin Lakes area. So just very easily you can see where each of these dots represent number of people observed in assessments. You can see that there's a lot of activity around the eastern part of the lake. I just know there's a lot of fishing there. That's probably driving it. And it's also a sheltered area for kayaking and paddleboarding. So it's nice there. And then there's a lot of activity around the Twin Lakes town area and around the northern shore as well. So just to give you guys an example of what we're seeing in the dashboards and what we can see, which is pretty exciting. Certainly when we get into the dashboards, there's many ways to drill into the data, to filter it, to look at the maps and have different information on the maps too, just to look at trends and hot spots and things like that. So with that, certainly if you guys have any questions, feel free to keep chatting those to us and we'll try to pick them up as we go. Julie, do we want to go to the next slide? Great. So the next example we wanted to show is, and we talked earlier, we have a lot of great camping assessment data in the app now. And in the middle, we show dispersion. That's a grayed out map. So you have to kind of look at that. That's Chaffee County and the general Chaffee County area. And you can see there's a really nice dispersion of data that's being collected at campsites throughout, with a big concentration around Buena Vista. Just to give you some insights into the data that's been collected, a majority, of course, has been in 2019. We're just getting into the spring months. And so those 44 campsite assessments for 2020 are recently, after the snow melted and people can get out and start observing campsites. And we also track things like residential use suspected, school-age children present. So that's somewhat sporadic, but we do track things like that. And then if you look at the overall impact, so one of the things that we have within each assessment, each assessment is an impact rating or impact score. And this is something that the Colorado Mountain Club worked out with the different land managers to say, hey, if you observe, if in the assessment we record certain conditions, if you will, those could generate an issue, and they also generate an impact score. And so we're able to, in some way, have some measure of impact. In this case, we're just looking at camping assessment impacts, but we can also have trail impacts and the signage and facilities impacts. So we just wanted to show you a couple examples like that, one for visitor use, one for camping under the analysis thing. And I think I'll turn it back over to Julie now for our.
Great, yeah. And just a quick look at our trails summary too, and we'll look at this actually in the dashboard here in a second. But again, lots of different ways to kind of visualize the different types of data that we're collecting. And within the app itself, we've probably got, gosh, I don't know, over 100 different data fields that users can complete. So there's, it can be really broad and overarching and just, reporting an issue like a downed tree, or it can get really granular to look at the diameter of that downed tree, or the really detailed information about a campsite and that sort of thing. So let me switch over to actually demo.
Julie, we do have a couple questions here that we're getting in, just so you know. Do you want me to read them off to you?
Yeah, I can see them here.
Okay.
So Mike's asking about the assessment filter and not seeing camping assessments. And yes, you're correct, Mike, that you're not able to see camping assessments because you're not a trained user yet. So before you go through that training, you should only probably have access to the quick report and the visitor use report and maybe the stewardship report. But you won't see the campsite report or the camping assessments, the detailed trail assessments, that sort of thing. And another question about RIMS being used by city land managers in Colorado Springs, specifically looking at trail assessments. Yeah, no, we're open to both. We do, most of the questions in the trail assessment specifically are focused on natural surface, more kind of backcountry single track type trails, but not exclusively. We do have some questions about urban trails that would work for something, a more urban setting or a city park. We've also talked specifically with the city of Salida and town of Buena Vista about a parks assessment module that again would be more detailed and more specific to what you might see happening either visitor use wise or facility wise in an urban park, which is obviously different than you would see at a trailhead or backcountry trail. Good questions.
And I'd add on to the last one. We're also looking for ways, if we need to add some data fields or add a new assessment, those are that we can work those out with Colorado Mountain Club, and we can add those as well. So if you realize that when you're in the app and you look at the trail assessment, you're like, hey, it would be nice to capture this additional data, we'd be open to either adding those data fields to the current assessment or maybe even adding a new assessment if there needs to be one that's more focused.
Great. Perfect. So hopefully now you guys can all see the dashboard screen that I have up in front of me. And I'm gonna just run through some of the dashboards that we've created based on the RIMS assessments that have come in thus far, and show you sort of what this process looks like. There's a lot of customizability in these dashboards, and we've just created a few that we think, you know, a lot of different types of land managers can use. So I'm going to start with our kind of big numbers, and this is just our our overview again of all of the information that has come through. So our different types of assessments here, again, we saw a lot of this data in the trends that Norm was showing us earlier. We can also see, you know, now we're over 400 trained volunteers and over 550 actual users. And then the issues is a component that we haven't talked a lot about in detail. We've set up some trigger points within the app itself. So if we have a down tree on a trail, it may not be a big issue if folks can step over it. But if it's greater than 24 inches in diameter, we flag that as an issue. And so that'll kind of pop up as a priority. We can see here, there have been 12 new issues in the past week. And with any of these numbers in the dashboard, we can actually click on them and drill into the information to see it in more detail. So here, you know, we're seeing the 12 new new issues that popped up in the last week, and we're seeing what the issue actually is here. So again, these are based on trigger points and flags that we've created in the app itself. So, you know, large down trees, large fire rings, extremely poor signs, other facilities. And you can, again, then drill into this information and get all the details that you need to understand that. I'm going to jump and look in a little more detail at our camping assessments, again, because that's kind of where we have the most data. Again, these are numbers that you saw a bit before, and some more detail that we can look at when it comes to resource impacts. So the, you know, total amount of disturbed area that folks have noted as they've done these 1,100 or campsite assessments is over 5 million square feet. I think that translates to over 100 acres of impacted area. There it is, 110 acres. So if you, and again, this is mostly in Chaffee County, these are just campsite assessments. If you extrapolate the total amount of you know, ground disturbance and essentially habitat disruption from dispersed camping in Colorado, it's going to be a huge number. So we can aggregate this data at lots of different levels, right? We could drill down and just look at it within one county, or zoom all the way out to the entire state and understand the bigger impacts. We can also drill into details around resources, looking at sites near water, near trails, or near roads. A lot of these indicators help us determine whether a campsite is illegal or legal. And we can change the criteria for what constitutes a site near water. This one is set at any site that's recorded within 100 feet of a water source. And so, you know, in wilderness areas, those are considered illegal campsites. And so we can, again, drill into this information and understand where they're located and how we want to prioritize perhaps decommissioning these sites that we know are too close to water. So once we get into this data sheet here, again, sorry, the dog's got great timing. We can drill into the details on the information that was submitted by the user. So these are all of the different metrics and data points that we have in this view. We can export it if we prefer to work with this in Excel. And then the other thing we can do that's helpful is to throw it on a map. So again, you've seen a little bit of this before, but we've got some customization that we can do with these maps within the dashboards themselves. So you can see all of our individual camping assessments here. And again, remember, we're just looking at the 346 that were located close to water. And we can change the dot size. Maybe we want to see the dot size based on that overall impact rating. So the higher the number here, the higher the impact rating. And as we zoom in, we can start to see where we've got these clusters of sites located near water and where we've got sites that have a higher overall impact rating, and 8 is actually the highest that you can have. So we may know, again, as we zoom in to these sites, that we really want to prioritize decommissioning or restoration at these ones located near water. We can change the colors and stuff as well, and do some additional just manipulation of the viewing. We can see these as a heat map. So again, to identify where we've got kind of hot spots in different areas to prioritize management. And again, you know, all of the information that we're pulling in from the RIMS assessments can be, you know, shown in the dashboards in different ways. So we've got our waste counts specifically associated with different campsites. And again, you know, we may know that we can send volunteers out to deal with all these sites that have less than a gallon of trash, or maybe 1 to 5 gallons. But if we've got a site that's got a truckload more of trash, then we're going to need to get agency staff or someone with the right tools to be able to manage those. Let's jump to the trails dashboard here real quick, because we had some folks interested in that. And again, we built this and it would be customized based on the information that the land manager is interested. So if you're, you know, really wondering about social trails and wanting to understand where those are located and prioritize decommissioning of those, we can show that in a bunch of different ways. Maybe you're only really interested in the trail conditions that are reported as extremely poor. Again, you can click on those, drill into the data, throw them on a map, and figure out how to prioritize those spots. Down trees is a good one. Just understanding where we're seeing down trees, mostly on trails, but some at campsites as well. Hazard trees, and then size. Again, maybe you're really only interested or able to deploy your crews to deal with those bigger trees, and you can figure that out from the data that's been collected. Let me show social trails here. Again, lots of different ways to kind of interpret and view the data that we're collecting.
Hey, Julie, we had a question about some of the export capability. So next time you go to a data sheet, maybe we could just look at that export, open the export.
Yeah, let's
feature.
pull up this guy. So once we get into the data sheet here, we do have more options, and essentially we can download and export in an Excel or CSV format. Basically any of the columns, we can export everything, or we can select specific columns that we want, and then export just that information.
Yeah, and so one of the other points that came about filtering is you can either, basically you export whatever's in your data sheet, and so you can filter down to that data sheet. So for example, right now, Julie's showing 634 rows. So you can drill into your dashboard, pull up the data sheet with the data behind that specific KPI, the key performance indicator you might be interested in, and then download just that data. And so to get there, you can either filter it, you can go through the dashboard, Julie's showing analyzing in the sidebar, which is a pretty cool way to quickly summarize and pivot on certain key data fields. So there's a lot of ways to explore. And then once you've gotten to that focus, that filtered either geographic or time-based or other area that you want to filter on, then you can easily export it in those formats.
Great. Excellent. So I'm going to jump back to our presentation here, and we're getting close on time, but we're just about kind of wrapping up what we wanted to share with you all today. And obviously lots of, we've got questions coming in and information about how to access the dashboards. And where we're at this point is we're in the process of building out the dashboards and customizing them. They are available at a subscription cost to either land managers or volunteer organizations that are interested in using them. Because of the level of analysis and customization that goes into that, it is a paid service. But we're really excited to work with lots of different types of partners to figure out what their data needs are and how we get the information to you in a way that you can utilize effectively. And just to kind of touch on again, sort of the goal behind this whole program is to get information from the field to folks that are either making decisions or doing stewardship work on the ground. So that's our goal and that's our priority. We think this can happen in the short term and we've got rapid response projects happening where people are seeing information come through the app and then going out and doing work on the ground. The URA's Trails group that I mentioned earlier is doing that currently. So they've got folks that are assigned to just do trail assessments, and then they've got their trail crew folks who are mostly clearing down trees, following up, and having the information that they need to go out and do the work. We do see this applicable for, kind of midterm and long-term maintenance needs as well. And really, again, having the detailed information that agencies or managers need to write grants, to prioritize their resources, and do a better job of stewarding these resources over time. So next steps, for sure, please download the app if you haven't already, and share this information with your network. So more people we can get utilizing the app, the better information we're gonna have to share with land managers. It's totally free. The app is free to all users, and that online training is available for staff and volunteers for free as well. When we're looking at managing and analyzing the information, we're setting up these custom dashboards. So if you are a land manager or volunteer group interested in a dashboard, contact us after today and we can talk through what that looks like. And then of course the implementation is going to eventually be the most important part of this program. We can collect all the data in the world, but if we're not actually using it to make an impact on public lands, then we're not kind of reaching its full potential. Yeah. So based on that, we've got one kind of final question for you guys. Based on what you sort of learned today, we're curious to know if and how you might be able to use RIMS to supplement your current data collection during COVID or just really even just generally. But again, want to get some brainstorming ideas from you on if the program looks like something that would be useful to your organization and how you might use that to improve your public land management and stewardship.
Hey, Julie, we do have a question from Mark Evans.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. So Mark asked, do managers request their lands be surveyed? And that's a great question that gets to the kind of data collection part that we didn't focus on a lot today in developing a data collection plan. And that can come either from an agency or from an individual or a volunteer group. But yeah, we're getting to the point where we want to prioritize data collection in areas that land managers are prioritizing, right? So again, in Chaffee County, we had a really big focus on campsites, and that's what the land managers told us that they really wanted to see was that campsite data. But in another area, it may be that it's, you know, visitor use monitoring, again, especially during the pandemic. I think that's one that we'll see more and more of. Trail assessments, again, in certain locations, right, in places that the land manager hasn't been able to get to recently. And we have talked about integrating a feature into the app where a user could actually see where those kind of hot spot areas are that need assessments. So that's something we're looking at for future development. It's not part of the program yet. But yeah, more and more we want to hear from land managers on where they want to see data collected, and then we can instruct volunteers to get out there and do that data collection.
I also want to put a plug in for one of my best practices, which is developing a data collection plan. And what we find is that the crowdsourcing of data through the app becomes very powerful when you have the app in individual users' hands, but they're also coordinated through like a volunteer group. And so identifying the areas that you want to have assessed, coming up with the frequency that you want to have observations collected, and assigning people or having people volunteer for certain slots seems to be a pretty effective way to make sure that you're, you know, getting eyes on the areas that you really want to see and the frequency that you want. So we find that that's very helpful as well.
Yeah. So I wanted to just throw our contact info up here. You can email me with any questions about the dashboards. And then all of the information and the online trainings are available at this website, cmc.org/app. So if you haven't gone through the training, again, it's real quick, just 20 minutes and a quick quiz, and we'll get you upgraded to be able to use all the features within the app. We have a couple questions, but we're real close on time. So Dan, I don't know if you need... Hang on.
Julie, I would say, yeah, go ahead and answer those last couple of questions, and then we'll just wrap it up with a 30-second closure on our end.
Great. Let me grab my dog.
Do you want me to answer any questions while you're gone, Julie? Unleashed.
Sorry, the mailman's here. Yeah, so a couple other quick questions here. Just a question about needing the dashboard in order to use the data and prioritize it for your organization's activities. In some cases, yes, it depends on the level of detail that you need. But again, all of the assessments that have been completed are viewable within the app itself. So depending on what your focus is and what your scope is, all of that information is in the app. So you can actually just go in, and if you're, you know, looking at a specific trail to do stewardship work on, you can look at that trail ahead of time, see all the different assessments, view all the pictures, and essentially have access to all of the data within the app itself. If you want the more detailed analytics and customized dashboards, then we'd go that route. But yeah. Data collection during COVID around parking lots. Yep, absolutely. I think that visitor use monitoring is a component of the app that, again, we didn't focus on a ton in the pilot year, but I think is going to be more and more applicable and of interest to land managers. Let's see if I missed any other questions. Question about water quality. We do have a question about erosion in campsites specifically, and then also in the trail assessment. So we're getting at some of that information about impacts to water for sure, but always looking for feedback on other ways that we can really do a good job of measuring that, and hopefully measuring it somewhat objectively.
Cool. In terms of citizen science, one of the exciting new assessments that we released was the stewardship report assessment, which is really cool. We just launched that earlier this month. And so you have a way for citizen scientists to go out and record the mileage and the time that they spend doing the project and then what they did. And in a sense, it opens up an issue, but it immediately closes it. So if they find a downed tree and they fix it, it's registered that, hey, they found an issue, but they also completed it. So yeah, having it integrated with citizen science projects, I think is a good fit too.
And Julie, as far as that question on the water quality,
Mhm.
does the app have that capability or can it be built in at a later time?
Yeah, so like I said, we do ask some questions about evidence of erosion at either a campsite assessment or on a trail. So we could filter that and just look at those assessments specifically. But water quality monitoring has come up as a potential additional module, right? That would require a whole different kind of set of questions and probably some specific training to make sure that volunteers are doing it correctly. But yeah, that's one that would be a great, I think, new additional assessment.
Well, I think one question got buried, and if you did answer it, my apologies. Mike Thomas was wondering if this is being shared with other partners like Leave No Trace, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have talked with Leave No Trace about it, and they had a couple of their staff last year just pilot it and play with it a little bit. We don't have any sort of formal partnership with them currently, but I think especially with the new stewardship report, we do have a question about whether folks, and this is specifically kind of oriented towards CMC trips, but if you go out with a group, do you do an LNT talk? That in and of itself is stewardship, right? So we have a way to kind of record that, and we'd love to have LNT, you know, be promoting this to folks that they're talking to, again, about ways to get more involved in stewardship and make sure they're recreating responsibly. It's a great question.
Cool. Yeah, lots of great comments in the chat box. We are running a couple minutes over. I really appreciate Colorado Mountain Club and Cana Advisors for presenting. I would just say, you know, on behalf of the Partners in Outdoors program, we are really excited to highlight this kind of work and support these efforts because, you know, it not only supports our conference theme, but it really supports who we are as an agency too. You know, we're about promoting and balancing both outdoor recreation and conservation, and this is fantastic. So thanks, Julie. Thanks, Norman. We really appreciate your time. You know, good luck with RIMS moving forward.